Welcome into the Energy Tech Podcast presented by Offsite Energy. Today we're filming live from ENTELEC 2026, and we are excited to welcome Lindi Sabloff, founder and CEO of Aurelia. Guys, welcome to Galveston.
Hey, Jeff, it is good to be here. I'm your co-host, Mike Flores, with the Energy Tech Podcast. And yes, we're in beautiful Galveston, Texas, hosting here live with ENTELEC 2026. And it is great to have Lindi Sabloff here with us. Glad you're here and able to join us.
Thank you guys so much.
Yes. And, you know, one thing we can appreciate, Lindi, is that you have been following the podcast, and it is now here. We get to turn the table a little bit and talk to you about what you're doing with your company, Aurelia. But before I do any of that, I really want to know what you do there. You know, you are the founder of the company, and I do have a few questions. But first, let's get an idea of who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. I would jokingly tell you that I'm a reformed Wall Street investment banker.
Okay.
I've seen the light. I need to build things, not be the tick on the dog. But what I'm building really, came out of that experience, working with family-owned manufacturing companies, working with oil and gas, and seeing the necessity for technology, but then seeing the human side of it, seeing that people were averse to adopting technology,
right,
even if it just didn't make sense, that they absolutely needed it. But then, then these companies fell to me, and I was selling them, and I was selling good companies, and it just fundamentally bothered me because I believe in manufacturing in America.
Yeah, so you bring a good point, and I think what I'm hearing from you is that you were on this, the bank investment side, which is all about results.
Yeah.
Which is, hey, if we don't have a results driver for this particular business or company, you may look at it only as a specific cost and a tie to, let's say, full-time employees or bodies. And sometimes it might be the leveraging of technology that could come in and practically help uplift or save the organization, right? And in doing that, where do you think there had to be a moment? Because you just said, hey, I was an investment banker, so we'll forgive you for that, right?
I appreciate that.
Okay, so we'll do that. But at the same time, you said something. You had it. Everybody has their aha moment. You know, in the big scheme of things, I always put it in terms of people have their 9/11. They always have their pre and post COVID story. They have this point. What was that point for you? There was a point. Think about it. There had to be a point.
There was a very specific point. I was working for a holding company selling off their non-performing assets.
Okay.
And was in a small town in Ohio.
Yeah.
Where the company had been the shining jewel for years. At its peak, in the early 1900s, they'd have 1,000 employees.
Right.
And by the time I was brought in, they had about 30. Right.
Wow.
And it was just clinging to the past and to processes. And it's not to say divorce yourself from good processes that work, but I think you have to look at things and say, automate the things that need automating in order to enable people to do what a person can do.
Yes. Okay. And so when you did this, now in terms of this company, were they kind of in the manufacturing corridor there in Ohio, or in the area, you said?
Yeah, out near Toledo.
Okay, so out near Toledo. And so I think when you say that, do you mean that, hey, we're going to automate what we can? And was that something that you personally, did you take that on as part of, sometimes when we do these, what I call the transformation for any organization, was it more like a boots on the ground approach, or did you come in and say, hey, it's going to be me or maybe a team and we're going to leverage different technologies? How did that happen?
I think, that was the start. That was the tipping point for me, where I wanted to go from, kind of being on the consulting, the strategy, the selling side to saying, I need to build something.
Right.
I see necessity, and especially the last couple of years, had really started focusing, returned to focusing back on manufacturing and to say, how do we do things better? How do we compete? And how do we compete in a rapidly changing world?
Yes.
How do we make things that are scalable, right?
Yes.
And I think there were a couple problems that I saw. One, technology comes hard and fast at people, right?
Yes.
And it says, you got to do this, you got to adopt it. But, people shouldn't fit technology. Technology needs to fit people,
Yes.
right? And, I think there's this fear of AI replacing people. We're seeing loads of layoffs, every day. I live in the Bay Area in California. You're seeing rips of, 20,000 people.
Yes.
And that's a tough thing to see, but AI is a necessity for manufacturing.
Right.
But you have to take the human component in there.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You have to understand, what do people do? What do they need, and what do they need to do that?
Right.
And especially, I think what breaks my heart in manufacturing, and just industrials in general, oil and gas, especially, you're seeing a high rate of attrition, right? If you
Yes.
look back from 2018 to now, the attrition rate has more than doubled.
Right.
That means that that one OT person in the field is now doing the job of 5 people.
Right.
Right? And
Right.
so how do we protect them? How do we empower them? How do we enable them?
Right.
Right? And that's really the job of technology, is to do those things. And so getting back to an earlier point,
Yeah.
automate the things that need to be automated so that people can do what people need to do.
And you bring a good point. Especially right now, I think you can read articles. They're just everywhere right now. So you see a paradigm. Here's what I mean. So you see a company that celebrates a profit, but then you see the cutting of jobs at the same time. And somewhere in the middle is the conversation of AI, right? Which is, I think what you're alluding to is sort of a celebration of profit and a decimation of those jobs that might sit in there, when the reality is really that's not what you're trying to do. What you're really trying to do is create you're trying to leverage AI in the augmentation of those folks, whether that's in manufacturing, energy, oil and gas, water, wastewater. You pick that vertical, that's what you're talking about, right?
Absolutely. And I think, my prior experience was really focused on what AI can do. And I think had this epiphany about a year ago, and that's when I founded Aria, which was to say, we're not ready for AI. If you look at the industrial sector, we're not ready, right? And you have to build infrastructure that makes sense. You have to shore up the foundation of your house before you can add on the deck.
Correct.
Off the back. And so with Aria, really focused on edge native infrastructure software to start tying in all these systems, right?
Yes.
I mean, the number one complaints I hear are, I can't trust the data.
Correct.
Right? Data quality is a massive issue, and it's not new. Yes. It's been around for decades.
Yes.
Right? But you can't have AI until you solve your data quality issue.
No, I think you're right. Eric Siegel wrote a really good book. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's called The AI Playbook. And in his book, he's got it's called BizML. So he's got a series of steps, which is common. It's a really good book. And one of those steps is, of course, your data quality, that data lineage. If you talk to folks in the industry, one of them is, let's say, Walker Reynolds. We've had Arlen Nipper on the show, who was the co-inventor of MQTT.
Yes.
And one of the things we've learned, and in our space in digital transformation, is you're right. I think you have to really step down and look at that data. And then once you do that, it is like, okay, how do we determine, and there's different ways that I don't think there's a couple of solutions. One of the most common ones is, of course, creating this user-defined templates or UDTs, an architecture, a way at the edge in which you can take that data, instantiate it, and create that semantic layer, right? And so in doing that, where do you think Aria fits in that? Or, how does that work for you in terms of Aria and working with customers and defining that semantic layer with data?
Yeah, I mean, I think, very simplistically, we say right data, right place, right workload, right? Like,
Yes.
You got to solve the data quality issue, right?
Yes.
Can you trust that data? Because otherwise, you're just, compounding the garbage in, garbage out.
Yes.
Problem, right? So, data is point number one.
Yes.
But point number two is, you get all these kind of cloud-first approaches to AI that, you need all this stuff and you got to do all these things. And yes, you need those analytics. You absolutely need the compliance. in today's era, but not all that AI should be done in the cloud. It's necessary to do certain things at the edge, and then you can send that little itty bitty JSON response up, and you can do what I term kind of like tier 2 or higher level analytics in the cloud, so you make more efficient systems. And so we're driving efficiency at RIA.
You know what? You're saying something that I'm seeing in the industries. It doesn't matter if I go to a manufacturing plant. It doesn't matter if I go to a cryo plant for oil and gas. It does not matter. You're right. And here's what I'm seeing. There's two euphemisms in data engineering. The first one, that you'll hear a lot is data engineering as a whole. And the second one is enriching data. That's an expensive way of what you're talking about, taking data from the edge, taking it to a data lake, taking the swamp and making sense of it, while at great expense to data engineering. And they call it enriching data. And you see that a lot. And you're just kind of like my radar, when you said that, it's going off saying, I think I was in a meeting in Houston last year, and this oil and gas company said, we were approached by an AI company, and they said in 6 weeks, we can optimize your fleet compressors in 6 weeks. And I said, no way. That is no way you can do that in 6 weeks.
You're getting my skeptical look here.
Yes, based on what we understood at the time. And I don't believe that they have any sort of model or any sort of thing in place. I don't know. I'd have to double check. I don't want to say for sure, but I know there's almost a high 90% chance that that is not the case in 6 weeks. If you can't go back at the edge and look at the data lineage and say, we have something semantically organized at the edge to give us what we need to be served up for AI.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think there are a couple problems, right? Especially when you look at that and you talk about data lineage and enriching data, you have to say, where is it best used? Where is it suited? Is it accurate? Are all the right questions? But also, especially with a lot of these new AI clouds and all the different cloud native programs, I think my real issue with it is not to say it doesn't work. This is great stuff. You have these very large companies who've built some incredible technology, and I don't mean to undermine that, but the problem with it really is you're not going to get OT buy-in into the analytics that are being produced there, and I think it really boils down to the fact that by the time the data travels up to that AI cloud, you've divorced the SME from the data.
Yes.
And that's a massive problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Well, especially, Lindy, if you want to iterate or you have merger acquisition later, right? So if you're an organization, and you saw this apparently, I mean, I'm sure that on the investment side, you saw where a company, they may want to create this M&A opportunity. And honestly, if you had that data lineage, you had that nice edge, some semantics, it is easy, and I wouldn't say easy, but I'll say that you benefit so that when you merger an acquisition, you can apply a playbook to that facility type, because sometimes you merger an acquisition, something similar, something a little bit different, but at the end of the day, you can still do that with the data because you have it, like you said, you have it divorced that away. And just created and orchestrated something that's just kind of, where the data is just sort of cleaned, right? So I hear your point about that, that you benefit by doing that early at the edge.
We don't give OT the tools to do things the way we need OT to do them is the problem. I mean, you have to have a top-down rules-based.
Yes.
Let's look at tagging, right?
Yes.
And you brought up an interesting point about M&A, right?
Yeah.
Oil and gas grows through acquisition primarily, not organically, right? And so you have all these different, incredibly smart people out in the field who've been MacGyvering stuff for years, right?
Yeah.
And then you add on another company where the same thing is happening, and it's wash, rinse, repeat. But if you don't give OT the template to build the way they need to build, you're going to have a structural problem.
Got it. No, I agree with you. Before we started the show, you said something interesting, that one of the things you talk about is people. And, I've had the privilege of doing quite a few digital transformation projects with Fortune 500s and EMPs. And I think what is not talked about enough, and I want to pivot on this with you.
Sure.
Because I think it's important to you. You mentioned this, is the people factor. Because it's great. Data lineage, you sit down with the OT director, IT, the CISO, the infrastructure, then you have all the different lines of business, right, in this conversation. But at the end of the day, I still have 20 different opinions about what should happen, even if I'm in the line of business and I know nothing about data infrastructure. I still have a big opinion, right? And I think I go to a ton of shows and I watch all these articles. There's a few folks that are out there. They make it sound sunny and shiny, but really it's dealing with people. And sometimes it's an attitude or a person or a specific way that they want to continue to have a legacy on data or what they think maybe needs to happen, in terms of people.
You're right. There are an increasing number of voices at the decision table. And how do you give each of them room to do their job?
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's that fear that kind of goes around the table. I mean, we live in a fear-based environment, and I think the way to kind of flip that, not to berate the point too much, it is to do proper infrastructure. It's to do something that is secure.
Sure.
That is scalable, that makes sense, that delivers good, actionable data.
Yeah.
Right? And then you can keep building, you can modernize, you can plug and play with all these different siloed systems. I think part of the problem also is that everybody comes in, and I don't, unless you're literally building a net new plant, there are no greenfield opportunities. These are all greenfield opportunities with brownfield roots.
Yeah, I like that.
Right?
You're right.
And so how do you can't come in and say you got to rip and replace all this stuff.
Right.
How do you work with all these legacy systems, legacy hardware, legacy software, right? And they are siloed systems.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of what we do is work with, other companies and really create an ecosystem that makes sense, right? You need the different data brokers.
Yes.
You need the different historians, right?
Yes.
And there are new things that are coming on the market that are exciting, but you can't go in and advocate and say, get rid of all this stuff and let's put in all the new and shiny.
Yes.
Right? You have to say, what's there? How do we pull the data? How do we do it in the right way? And different systems need things in different times. If you're doing automation, you need, you're talking nanoseconds. If you're doing different, SCADA, DCI, like et cetera, maybe you need it every 5 minutes. Some other stuff, you maybe once a week. So you're pulling data in different ways.
Right.
There are also different rules around that data.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, with agentic AI, everybody's talking about it has access to all these different things.
Yes.
Well, it's a fallacy as a customer to think that your data is your data. Unfortunately, your data should be your data. It bothers me terribly, but you have all these different companies, and there are different rules on how, according to a contract, how you can use that data.
Yes.
So, infrastructure isn't just one layer.
Yes.
Right. I mean, you've got communications. Right.
Yes.
If somebody's working within the Purdue system, like
Correct.
if you're coming into layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, et cetera, and so, and no one, while there are common, there are common things across all of it, everybody has their special flavor to it.
Yes.
And again, going back to if you're acquiring companies, then they have their special flavor as well. So how do you unite all these solid systems with a good backbone? And that's really kind of one of the primary things we're tackling.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing from you is, hey, there's times where you don't need everything in either sub-millisecond, real time. There may be times where you're better off taking maybe time series at rest, data at rest.
Exactly.
To do what you want to do.
Yep.
And there are times where you do want it sub-millisecond, which is a lot of times, especially with time series at the edge, you may not need to do that all the time. Unless
Depends.
you're stamping out parts, at Toyota in milliseconds.
Yep.
That's a little different, right? That's deterministic, and so I agree with you. But just not even tackling the technology part, you're intriguing me because there's something in your mind that changed, and here's what I mean. when I think of someone that's in on the investment, the banking side, and the financial or even the VC side, I'm thinking of this person. Mike, honestly, when you first got here, what I was looking for was the women's pinstripe suit. I was thinking about that. I saw investor. I was like, okay, that's probably what we're going to get. And I was expecting the Wall Street canned person. You're not that person. So,
Mike, I'm an ex-rugby player, so you really couldn't get farther away.
But what? It's not just your mind. Like, there's a mindset shift, or this has always been you. Tell me about that. Like, I'm interested. Like, what changed your mind, because you don't fit right now. You're just not fitting my bill for anybody that's on the.
You saying I broke the mold, Mike?
Yeah, you did. You broke the mold. So
no, I take that as a compliment, honestly.
Yeah.
And no, this has always been me.
Okay.
I think when you're an investment banker, numbers are easy. You can't teach numbers. My first job, the partner in charge, I said, why aren't you hiring one of those Wharton or Harvard kids? Why are you hiring me? I was a political philosophy major.
Yeah.
Right? Like, why? And he goes, look, I can teach anybody numbers. I can teach anybody a balance sheet, right?
Yeah.
I can't teach somebody who can problem solve and somebody who can talk to other people. You get people, Lindy.
Yeah.
And it was one of the highest compliments I think I've ever gotten. And you now, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So now that you get people, how did you take Orium and how did you marry that part, the business side of this? Because there's any company, Lindy, you don't know, but I've got 8 kids. My oldest son is 31 years old. And my youngest is 18. And I've put all of them through college.
What is your skincare routine, Mike? I need it.
I get that a lot too. And what I tell them, and even when I work with clients in digital transformation, I say, your dreams are only as big as your bank account. And that means that, there's a lot of things you can do, but at the end of the day, I didn't go to Wharton. So
neither did I.
Right. And so there's things that you're going to work in, but you can grow from that. And so how did you decide, okay, how did you take Aurea and say, okay, we want to marry what the business is, because at the end of the day, there is a bottom line.
Absolutely.
Right? Clients don't invest without the outcome.
Yep.
Even if it's AI, there's a business outcome. So how did you marry the business outcome with a technical piece in order to drive value?
That's a fantastic question. I think it was just seeing the necessity to build a specific product, to build this platform, to build the products around that platform, but really to be able to go in and to listen and to have conversations. I think the highest compliment I got was, a couple months ago, I was talking with a SCADA manager, and at the end of it, he goes, Lindy, you listened, and I am confident that you can help us, right? Yeah. But the only way that I can go into those conversations is if I'm confident in the technology that we've built.
Yes.
That I know that I can help them, and I don't have to force everything on somebody. Everybody starts in different places, right? I think as a technology company, you always kind of look for that Trojan horse that you can get in and then just sell everything.
Right.
But that's not our approach. It's to say, let's go in, let's see how you're doing things.
Yes.
Right? We don't have to change everything. I think it's that we can add that layer of intelligence.
Yes.
And have the it's not a rigid layer. It's a flexible layer that we can go in and we can meet them where they're at. You don't change things overnight. Like that company you were talking about, we can do something in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, real change is incremental. You have to be patient.
Yeah.
And so I think, it's marrying the technology to the business is, understanding, what the problems are.
Right.
Understanding that there are a lot of different layers and components to those problems. It's not just one thing.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Even if it seems straightforward, it never is once you pull back the curtain.
So it's not a one single thing, and it's not a yes or no, right? It's not that plain. So I appreciate that, and now I want to unpack a little bit about Aurea, and
Please.
Let's do that, because I think you've defined really well. Number one, how Aurea's came about. That this is great. a really good insight here. But now, if I'm responsible for a budget, you and I talked before this, and what we see, even the energy tech and ops site, what we noticed is you have this layer of decision makers. They're not C-suite trained folks. They're not technologists. What they are is they've been relegated a budget, and it could be a mid-range budget. Sometimes it's $1 million, a few million, whatever the case is, and they have an order, and that order is define your data, make data the commodity of the business, number one. Number two, secure it. And number three, it's got to bring value to us in the business, right?
Yes.
So either we're going to make more widget, or we're going to kill cost, or we're going to crack more product to sell it downstream, right? We're doing these things.
Yep.
So they've been relegated to do that. Well, all the while, they're instrumentation and electrical folks. They're automation people. So my question to you is, how does Oria, where does it fit in that gap to help that group?
I think I jokingly come into a conversation and I say, I'm going to make your boss's boss happy. And everybody
Yeah.
goes, okay, now we can talk, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
It's not just about your boss. It's
Yes.
your boss's boss that you start to get the push down from. I think a good example would be the talk that my colleague John Archer at Red Hat and I gave this morning.
Yeah.
About something actually very straightforward. I've learned with my engineers, I never say the word simple or easy, and then move it
Yes.
along.
That's right.
Very straightforward, and just creating kind of, for the OT folks, everything has to, be defined in certain ways. And I appreciate that. It's logical, it's straightforward. There's
Yeah.
there's no guesswork there.
A whiteboard almost. That's the
Yeah.
way I do everything with OT is whiteboard.
Exactly.
It's a whiteboard.
Spot on.
Yeah.
And so we talked about using BootC so that you can kind of do remote fleet operation of devices in the field.
Okay.
Right. And we could sit here and immediately do kind of a back of the napkin calculation on savings.
Yeah.
And for one simple thing, instead of doing, twice a year truck rolls to send people out, remotely, having, planned downtime, you put the control in the hands of the OT folks. They can do, any upgrades they need whenever they need. They can do rollbacks, and it's as simple, with a couple clicks of a mouse.
Yes.
Or, sorry, touchpad.
Yeah.
Depending. But it's to say, look, you can have software-defined systems that have, a hardware, kind of environmental feel to them.
Yes.
And they're secure. You're actually, we talked about the CISO before. You're increasing security, right? Because you have massive cybersecurity risks if you're not updating your OS on a regular basis. If you're not patching.
And patch management, yeah.
Yep. Exactly. So, in one fell swoop, we can please every person at the table, right?
Yes.
It doesn't require additional IT resources to do this. It's secure. It's helping, harden things, and it makes it so the OT guys get to decide when their critical equipment is down.
Right.
You put the power of downtime in their hands.
Yes.
It's not a top-down decision saying we're going to do this, plan downtime at this, and especially with truck rolls, you're doing it kind of sequentially. You gotta work your way through device by device.
Yes.
Right. This way, you can actually push updates to an entire fleet.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And you can also break down the fleet into smaller sub-fleets. You only want to do it this and then. If you want to do things overnight, we've also done it with BootC, so you can actually, once you have an image device out there,
Yes.
you can upgrade just on the Delta.
Got it.
So it makes things smart. You get more control, more security. You're saving on the hard cost of the truck rolls.
Yes.
Right? As well as the downtime of critical equipment, which, from small to large, you can be from millions, upward of, billions of dollars in lost revenue. So it actually checks all the boxes going down, not just coming in on one business level.
Yes. And now I didn't catch your talk this morning, and everyone, even, we've all presented, and you come away from that first. You cannot cover everything in the time you did. And so we didn't get a chance to catch it. Those will be out at some point for the INTELEC community to see. But I almost guarantee there's a couple of things maybe you missed. How can you articulate those to anyone that's watching, especially if they're part of the ENTELEC community or part of the OT ICS space?
I think, some of the things that we talked about, that we missed, we didn't get to delve into the hardware side as much, and like actually being able to build appliances that do what you need to do.
Got it.
And I think we didn't get into, what it can enable when you start putting edge devices in the field. And it's a scary topic.
Yes.
Right? Because you go, oh my God, if I'm putting all these devices out there, what about the security issues with that? And that comes back to proper infrastructure, proper security, right?
Yes.
But making sure that all the different layers come together in a way that makes sense.
Yes.
So that it remains secure. And it gives you the ability to modernize. And not modernize one time. This is not a one-time thing. It gives you the ability to keep modernizing, to future-proof your enterprise.
Yes.
So we didn't get into that. It's a little bit of a broader conversation. We were kind of speaking on a more specific topic.
Well, you're driving us to get you on the Energy Tech podcast in our studio in Cannonsburg, Pennsylvania, in some way, somehow. We're going to make that happen. It's very soon.
I'm originally from Pittsburgh.
Are you? Okay.
I bleed black and gold.
Well, that is awesome. And I think a couple of final things that real fast. Right now, your take on AI in the industrial space. What is your prediction going in the next year to plus?
I think the adoption is gonna hit that hockey stick point. It hasn't yet. I think the advances in agentic AI are going to be a forcing factor. But I think a lot of people are going to realize that there are some significant gaps that they have to take care of first in order to implement AI in the way they need to do it.
Yes. Awesome. We've got Lindi Sabloff here with us from Maria. We want to keep her, but we have to let her go. I want to keep going, man, and cancel my other appointment. But it's great to have you on the show. And folks can reach out to you. We're going to post a link here. You can also like and subscribe here to the Energy Tech podcast. And we're for sure going to catch up with you again, Lindi. It was great to have you. You can catch them here at ENTELEC 2026. Lindi, it's great to have you on the show.
Mike, this was too much fun, man. Also, seriously, the skincare room. I need to know, man.
You'll know.
And Jeff over there, thank you so much. Appreciate you guys.
Yes, thank you so much.